I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from. My future son-in-law said my car needed maintenance to keep me safe before my weekend trip. The next day when I picked it up, I dropped my purse and bent down to grab it. That's when I found a tracker hidden under the vehicle. Instead of confronting him, I quietly removed it and attached it to a semi-truck heading to Canada. The next day, I got a terrifying call from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police saying they'd arrested a man carrying my photo and detailed plans to kidnap me. But let me backtrack and tell you how I got to this point because, honey, this story has more twists than a mountain road. I'm Charlotte Morrison, 63 years old, and I've been a widow for exactly 2 years, 3 months, and 14 days. Not that I'm counting or anything, but when you've been married to someone for 38 years, you tend to notice when they're suddenly not snoring next to you every morning. My husband Richard died of a heart attack while trimming the hedges in our backyard. Knowing Richard, that was probably exactly how he would have wanted to go, quick, efficient, and with a perfectly manicured lawn as his final accomplishment. The paramedics said he was gone before he hit the ground. No pain, no warning, just gone. For months after I'd wake up reaching for him, my hand finding only cold sheets where warmth used to be. Now before you start thinking this is going to be some sob story about a poor widow, let me set something straight. Richard might have been the one who fixed the leaky faucets and balanced the checkbook, but I was the one who turned his engineering salary and my teaching income into something substantial. And by substantial, I mean a portfolio worth approximately $8 million. Who knew that all those summers spent listening to my father discuss the stock market over Sunday dinners would actually pay off? While Richard was designing bridges for the city of Portland, I was building our financial future, one careful investment at a time. The thing about being a wealthy widow is that people suddenly start caring about your well-being in ways they never did before. Take my future son-in-law, Michael Bradford, for instance. 3 years ago, when my daughter Sophia first brought him home, he couldn't have cared less about my daily routine or my car maintenance schedule. Now suddenly he's channeling his inner automotive expert full of wisdom about oil changes and tire rotations. It was Friday evening, and I was setting the dining room table with my good china, the Lennox set that Richard and I received as a wedding gift 40 years ago. I'd made pot roast with roasted vegetables, Michael's favorite, though I was beginning to wonder if his enthusiastic compliments about my cooking were as genuine as his smile. The doorbell rang at exactly 6:30. Michael was always punctual. I'd give him that. "Mom!" Sophia's voice rang through the house as she let herself in with her key. "Something smells amazing." My daughter appeared in the dining room doorway, her auburn hair swept up in a neat bun, still wearing her work clothes from the marketing firm downtown. Behind her, Michael followed with that smooth, confident stride of his. 37 years old, athletic build, perfectly styled dark hair, and a smile that had probably charmed his way through life. "Charlotte," he said warmly, crossing the room to kiss my cheek. "You look lovely this evening." I caught a whiff of expensive cologne. Everything about Michael was expensive. His tailored suits, his BMW parked in my driveway, even the watch on his wrist that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage. "Thank you, Michael. Please sit down. Dinner's ready." As we settled around the table, I noticed Michael's eyes scanning the room, lingering on the framed photographs on the sideboard, the antique clock Richard had restored, the small Tiffany lamp in the corner. He did that, sometimes cataloged my possessions like an appraiser at an estate sale. "So, Mom," Sophia said, serving herself some green beans, "Michael mentioned you're driving up to Portland this weekend for business meetings." "That's right. Henderson Financial Group on Saturday morning, then Jason Davidson's office in the afternoon. Nothing too exciting." I passed the gravy boat to Michael. His expression shifted to one of concern. "Charlotte, that's a 3-hour drive each way. When's the last time you had your Lexus serviced?" I paused, fork halfway to my mouth. Well, I'm not entirely sure. A few months ago, I think." "A few months?" Michael leaned forward, his brow furrowed with what looked like genuine worry. "Charlotte, with all due respect, that's not safe. Highway driving puts a lot of stress on a vehicle, especially one that's 8 years old now." "7?" I corrected automatically. 7 years old, and you can't remember the last time it was serviced." He shook his head, exchanging a meaningful glance with Sophia. "I really think we should get that checked out before your trip. I'd hate for you to break down on the highway alone in the middle of nowhere." The way he emphasized alone made something uncomfortable twist in my stomach. "Michael's right, Mom," Sophia chimed in, setting down her fork with a decisive click. "You could have a flat tire, or the engine could overheat, or the brakes could fail going down a mountain pass," Michael added. His eyes met mine across the table, and for just a second I could have sworn I saw something cold behind that concerned expression. But then he smiled and the moment passed. I'm not trying to scare you, Charlotte. I just care about your safety. We both do. That's very thoughtful of you both, I said carefully. But I'm sure the car is fine. I haven't noticed any problems. Most problems don't give you warning signs until it's too late. Michael dabbed his mouth with his napkin. Tell you what, why don't you let me take it to my mechanic tomorrow? Marco's been servicing my BMW for years. He's honest, thorough, and he'll work quickly. I'll have it back to you by tomorrow evening in plenty of time for your Saturday morning departure. I hesitated. Something about the offer felt off. But looking at Sophia's eager, hopeful face and Michael's expression of sincere concern, I felt my resistance crumbling. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe 2 years of living alone had made me suspicious of kindness. I suppose that would be helpful, I heard myself saying, as long as it's not too much trouble. No trouble at all. Michael's smile widened. That's what family does, we look out for each other. Family. The word hung in the air between us. Michael and Sophia had been engaged for 6 months now, the wedding planned for next spring. He would officially be family, then bound to us by marriage, and according to the prenuptial agreement I gently suggested, and Sophia had firmly rejected by law. After dinner, as I was clearing the plates, Michael followed me into the kitchen. Charlotte, before I forget. He leaned against the counter, hands in his pockets, looking casual and comfortable in my home. I wanted to ask you about your investment portfolio. You're still working with that advisor up in Seattle, right? What's his name? Henderson. Margaret Henderson, actually, I corrected, loading plates into the dishwasher. And yes, she's been handling some of my real estate investments. Real estate investments. His eyebrows lifted with interest. I didn't know you were involved in that market. That's actually my area of expertise, you know. Perhaps I could take a look at your holdings, give you a second opinion. Sometimes these advisors push properties that benefit their commission more than their clients. My hand stilled on the dish I was holding. That's kind of you, Michael, but Margaret has been excellent. I'm very satisfied with her work. Of course, of course. He held up his hands in a gesture of surrender. I'm not trying to step on any toes. I just know that at your age, he caught himself. I mean, as we get older, it's important to make sure our assets are properly protected and managed. Estate planning trusts, making sure everything's in order for the next generation. The next generation, meaning Sophia, meaning eventually him. I appreciate your concern, I said, keeping my voice level, but I'm quite capable of managing my own affairs. I'm sure you are. That smile again, smooth as butter. I just want to make sure you're not being taken advantage of. These financial types can smell vulnerability, especially with... He paused delicately. Well, with widows. They see someone grieving, maybe not as sharp as they used to be, and they move in for the kill. Not as sharp as I used to be. The words stung more than they should have. From the dining room, Sophia called out, Mom, where did you put the photo albums? Michael wants to see pictures of you and Dad at our age. Top shelf in the study. I called back then, turned to find Michael still watching me, his expression thoughtful. You know what I've been thinking, he said, his voice dropping to a more confidential tone. You've been rattling around in this big house all alone for 2 years now. Have you ever considered downsizing, getting something smaller, more manageable, maybe one of those nice retirement communities where you wouldn't have to worry about maintenance and yard work? I'm 63, Michael, not 93, and I like my house. I'm sure you do. He straightened, checking his expensive watch. I'm just saying holding on to the past isn't always healthy. Richard's been gone for over 2 years. At some point you have to move forward. Before I could respond, Sophia reappeared with an armful of photo albums, her face bright with excitement. Found them. Come on, Michael. You have to see Mom and Dad at my age. They were so young. As they settled on the couch, flipping through pictures of a life that felt both immediate and impossibly distant. I stood in the kitchen doorway and watched. Michael's arm was draped casually over Sophia's shoulders, his fingers absently playing with a strand of her hair. They looked perfect together, young, successful, beautiful. So why did I feel like I was watching a predator circle its prey? Mom, look at this one. Sophia held up a photo of Richard and me on our honeymoon in Hawaii. We were both tanned and grinning, my hand displaying my modest engagement ring, Richard's arm around my waist. You two were so in love. We were, I said softly, moving to sit in the armchair across from them. 38 wonderful years. You must miss him terribly, Michael said, and his voice held just the right note of sympathy. It's hard losing a partner, suddenly having to make all the decisions alone, handle all the responsibilities. That's why it's so important to have family around, people you can trust to help shoulder the burden. I managed just fine, I said, perhaps more sharply than I intended. Michael's smile didn't waver. Of course you do. I'm just saying you don't have to manage alone. That's what we're here for. Right, honey? Absolutely, Sophia agreed, squeezing his hand. Mom, we want to help. Please let us. Looking at my daughter's earnest face, I felt something inside me soften. Maybe I was being unfair. Maybe Michael genuinely did care. Maybe my loneliness had made me cynical and suspicious. Tell you what, I said, standing up. Let me get my car keys. Michael, if you really don't mind taking it to your mechanic tomorrow, I'd appreciate it. Mind Charlotte, I insist. He stood as well, holding out his hand. I'll pick it up first thing in the morning, have Marco give it a complete once-over and bring it back tomorrow evening. You'll be all set for your trip on Saturday. I retrieved my keys from the hook by the back door and placed them in his palm. His fingers closed around them, and he gave my hand a gentle squeeze. You're doing the right thing, he said quietly. Letting people help you. After they left, the house felt enormous and empty. I locked up, turned off the lights, and climbed the stairs to the bedroom I'd once shared with Richard. His side of the closet was still full of his clothes. I'd never had the heart to donate them. Sometimes late at night, I'd open the closet door and bury my face in his old cardigan, breathing in the fading scent of his cologne and the lingering smell of the Old Spice soap he always used. Richard, I whispered to the darkness, I think I might have made a mistake. But Richard wasn't there to answer. He never would be again. I climbed into bed, pulled the covers up to my chin, and tried not to think about why the idea of Michael Bradford having my car keys made my stomach twist with unease. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of crisp October air that makes everything feel possible. I'd always been an early riser, a habit from 35 years of teaching high school history, where arriving late meant facing down a classroom of caffeinated teenagers who could sense weakness like sharks smell blood in the water. Michael had been true to his word. He'd picked up my car at 8 o'clock Friday morning and returned it Friday evening with a detailed receipt from Marco's Auto Service. According to the invoice, they'd changed the oil, rotated the tires, checked the brake pads, and done something called a comprehensive safety inspection. Michael had refused to let me pay for it. Consider it an early birthday present, he'd said with that charming smile. My birthday wasn't for another 4 months. I showered, dressed in my good navy pantsuit, the one I wore for important business meetings, and spent extra time on my makeup. At 63, I'd earned every line on my face, but that didn't mean I couldn't present myself professionally. My salt and pepper hair was cut in a neat bob that framed my face, and I'd splurged on a good haircut last week. By 8:30, I was backing my silver Lexus ES 350 out of the garage. The morning was gorgeous. Autumn leaves painted the trees in shades of amber and gold, and the air smelled like wood smoke and coffee. My first meeting with Margaret Henderson wasn't until 10 o'clock, which gave me plenty of time for the drive into downtown Portland. Or so I thought. Traffic on Interstate 84 was moving at roughly the speed of continental drift. Apparently, someone had decided that Saturday morning was the perfect time to repave half of downtown Portland. I found myself crawling along Elm Street, watching the minutes tick by on my dashboard clock, mentally recalculating my arrival time. I hate being late. It's rude, unprofessional, and it puts you at a disadvantage in any negotiation. Richard used to joke that I'd probably arrive at my own funeral 15 minutes early, just to make sure everything was properly organized. By the time I finally pulled into the parking garage at Portland Financial Plaza, it was 9:45. I had exactly 15 minutes to find a parking spot, get up to the 15th floor, and compose myself before the meeting. The parking garage was a concrete maze of identical levels and fluorescent lighting. I finally found a spot on level 3, grabbed my briefcase from the passenger seat, and reached for my purse. That's when everything went wrong. Or right, depending on how you look at it. My purse, a sensible leather shoulder bag that I'd owned for 5 years, caught on the gear shift as I tried to pull it toward me. The strap gave way with a ripping sound, and suddenly the entire contents of my purse were fountaining across the car's interior like a handbag explosion. Lipstick rolled under the driver's seat. My reading glasses case bounced twice before disappearing under the dashboard. Receipts fluttered down like confetti. A roll of mints made a break for freedom and disappeared into the footwell on the passenger side. Oh, for heaven's sake! I muttered, unbuckling my seatbelt and leaning down to gather the scattered items. I opened the driver's door to get better access to the mess, then got down on my hands and knees on the parking garage floor, grateful I'd worn pants instead of a skirt, and reached under the car to retrieve my glasses case. That's when I saw it. Attached to the underside of my car, just behind the front wheel well, was a small black device about the size of a deck of cards. It was held in place by a strong magnet, and even from my awkward position on the concrete floor, I could see the small green light blinking steadily on one corner. For a long moment, I just stared at it, my brain struggling to process what I was seeing. That definitely hadn't been there 2 days ago when I dropped my parking permit in this same garage and had to crawl around looking for it. I knew every inch of my car's undercarriage after that embarrassing episode. My heart began to pound. With shaking hands, I reached out and pulled the device free. It came away easily, the magnet releasing with a soft click. I sat back on my heels, holding the thing in my palm like it was a particularly venomous spider. It was heavier than it looked. Professional-grade equipment, not some cheap gadget from a discount store. And there, printed in small letters on one side, Silent Tracker Pro, GPS location device. A GPS tracker. Someone had attached a GPS tracker to my car. Someone wanted to know where I was going. I sat there on the cold concrete floor of the parking garage, my nice pantsuit probably getting filthy, my scattered belongings still strewn across my car's interior, and felt my world tilt sideways. Who would do this? Why? But even as the questions formed, I already knew the answer. Or at least I knew where to start looking for the answer. Michael Bradford had had my car for almost 24 hours. Marco's Auto Service might have done an oil change and tire rotation, but someone had also taken the opportunity to plant a tracking device. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the device. Part of me wanted to throw it across the parking garage, watch it shatter against a concrete pillar. Part of me wanted to march straight to Sophia's apartment and demand an explanation. But another part of me, the part that had spent 35 years dealing with teenagers, understanding that the direct approach isn't always the smartest approach, told me to slow down. Think, plan. I pulled out my phone and Googled Silent Tracker Pro GPS device. 20 minutes later, I was still sitting in my car reading everything I could find about covert surveillance devices. Turns out you can buy these things on Amazon for less than $50, and they're marketed to concerned parents and security-conscious business owners. This particular model promised real-time location updates, geofencing alerts, and 6 months of battery life. How thoughtful of Michael to spring for the premium option. The articles I found described various scenarios where people might use GPS trackers, keeping tabs on teenage drivers, monitoring company vehicles, tracking elderly relatives with dementia, or tracking your future mother-in-law's movements so you know exactly when and where she'll be traveling alone. My phone buzzed with a text from Margaret Henderson. Running 10 minutes late. See you at 10:10. So sorry. The interruption snapped me out of my spiral. I had a choice to make, and I had to make it now. Option 1. Call Sophia immediately. Confront Michael. Involve the police. Handle this through official channels. Option 2. Play along. Let Michael think his little tracker is still working. See what he does with the information. I thought about my daughter, sweet, trusting Sophia, who'd been hurt so many times by men who didn't deserve her. Marcus, the musician who turned out to be married. Brett, the businessman who turned out to be broke. Kevin, the entrepreneur, who was really just selling essential oils to his grandmother's bridge club. And now Michael Bradford, who seemed too good to be true. Because he was. If I confronted him now, he'd have time to cover his tracks, spin some explanation that would make me look paranoid, and Sophia feel caught in the middle. He'd paint me as a lonely widow who'd become suspicious and irrational in her grief. Sophia might even believe him. She wanted so badly to believe in him. No, if I was going to protect my daughter, I needed to be smart about this. Strategic. I needed to understand exactly what Michael was planning before I made my move. Decision made, I carefully placed the tracker in my briefcase, gathered up the rest of my scattered belongings, and headed into the meeting with Margaret. Henderson went well despite my racing thoughts. Margaret was everything I wasn't, blonde 30-something, wearing a designer suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. But she was also brilliant, ruthless, and refreshingly honest about both those qualities. "Charlotte," she said, spreading documents across her glass desk, "I have excellent news about the Riverside Properties acquisition. If you sign today, you'll be the owner of a commercial real estate portfolio that will generate approximately $60,000 in monthly passive income. $60,000 a month. That was more than most American families earned in a year. And it would be mine, adding to an already substantial fortune that Sophia knew about in abstract terms, but had never really understood the scope of. Richard and I had been careful about that. We'd raised Sophia to be financially responsible, to work for what she wanted, to understand the value of money. We'd paid for her education, helped with her first apartment, but we'd never flaunted our wealth. We'd lived well, but not ostentatiously. And now I was glad for that caution. Because if Michael Bradford knew exactly how much money was at stake, things might get even more dangerous than they already were. I signed the papers. Margaret walked me through every detail, every clause, every contingency. By the time I left her office, it was nearly 1 o'clock. My second meeting was at 2:30 with Jason Davidson, a 28-year-old financial wunderkind who managed some of my more aggressive investments. Normally, I avoided doing business with anyone who used disrupt as a verb. But Jason had made me 17% returns last year, which purchased a lot of tolerance for trendy vocabulary, which left me with 90 minutes and a GPS tracker burning a hole in my briefcase. I drove to a coffee shop 3 blocks away, ordered a latte, and sat at a corner table with my laptop. Time to do some research. A quick Google search for Michael Bradford Premier Financial Planning Portland turned up his LinkedIn profile and the company website. According to LinkedIn, he'd worked at Premier Financial for 8 months. Before that, he'd worked at nothing. His employment history before Premier was blank. Interesting. I tried Facebook. His profile was locked down tight with only basic information: visible, born in Chicago, attended University of Illinois, enjoys golf and fine dining. No family photos, no old friends tagging him in throwback pictures, no digital footprint beyond the most superficial details. For a man in his late 30s, that was unusual. Most people our age had at least some embarrassing photos from their 20s floating around the internet. I pulled out my phone and called my accountant. Harold Finch had been doing my taxes since Clinton was president. He had the personality of a particularly thorough accountant, which is to say he remembered every detail of every financial transaction I'd ever made and had opinions about most of them. "Harold," I said when he answered, "I need a favor. Can you pull up my accounts and look for anything unusual? Any transactions I might not have initiated, any changes to direct deposits, anything that seems off." There was a pause. "Charlotte, is everything all right? This sounds like you think someone might be stealing from me." "Yes, Harold, I think someone might be. Give me 2 hours. I'll call you back." Next, I called my attorney. Susan Martinez had handled Richard's estate and my business contracts for years. She was sharp, fierce, and completely unimpressed by anyone who thought they were cleverer than they actually were. "Susan," I said, "I need you to conduct a thorough background check on someone. Michael Bradford, 37 years old, works for Premier Financial Planning here in Portland, engaged to my daughter Sophia." "Charlotte." Susan's voice shifted into her serious lawyer tone. "What's going on?" I told her about the tracker, about Michael's sudden interest in my car maintenance and my financial portfolio, about the blank spaces in his online presence. Susan was quiet for a long moment. "Charlotte, I want you to promise me something. Promise me you won't confront this man alone, and promise me you'll involve law enforcement if this gets dangerous." "I promise I won't do anything reckless," I said, which wasn't exactly the same thing but seemed to satisfy Susan for the moment. My coffee had gone cold. I checked my watch time to head to my meeting with Jason Davidson. But first I had a stop to make. I pulled into the truck stop on Interstate 84 at 3:45 in the afternoon. The parking lot was full of 18-wheelers, some idling, some silent drivers grabbing coffee and hot dogs before hitting the road for long hauls across the country. I felt ridiculous. A 63-year-old woman in a business suit clutching a GPS tracker and a roll of industrial-strength tape I'd bought at the hardware store down the street, about to commit what might technically be considered tampering with commercial vehicles. But I'd made my decision. If Michael wanted to track my movements, fine. I'd give him something to track. I walked slowly through the rows of trucks, trying to look casual, like I belonged there. I was looking for something specific, Canadian license plates, and a destination that would take the tracker far, far away from Portland. I found it near the back of the lot, a Peterbilt with Alberta plates, and a load sheet visible through the window that indicated a delivery to Vancouver. Perfect. I glanced around. No one was watching. Most of the drivers were inside the truck stop restaurant or sleeping in their cabs. With shaking hands, I crouched down next to the trailer and attached the tracker to the underside as close to the same position it had been on my car as I could manage. The magnet grabbed hold with a solid click. For a moment, I had a vision of causing some kind of international incident. What if the truck got searched at the border? What if they found the tracker and traced it back to me? But it was too late now. The deed was done. I straightened up my knees, protesting 63-year-old knees don't appreciate crouching next to truck trailers, and walked back to my car as calmly as I could manage. My hands were still shaking as I started the engine. Now came the hard part, waiting to see what would happen when Michael discovered that his carefully monitored target was suddenly heading north into Canada at 65 miles per hour. The drive home gave me time to think. Too much time, actually. My mind kept circling back to the tracker, to Michael's concerned face across my dining room table, to Sophia's trusting smile. How long had this been going on? The tracker was new. I would have noticed it before. But what else had Michael been doing? What other invasions of my privacy had I been too trusting, too lonely, too grateful for his attention to notice? I thought about the times he'd helped me organize Richard's papers after the funeral, how he'd been particularly interested in the life insurance documents and bank statements. At the time, I'd been grateful for the assistance. Grief had turned my normally meticulous filing system into chaos, and Michael had been patient and thorough. Too thorough, maybe. I thought about his suggestion that Sophia move back in with me for a few months while they planned the wedding. It would be good for both of you, he'd said. She could keep you company, and you could help her with wedding decisions. At the time, it had seemed thoughtful. Now I wondered if it was really about having an inside source for my daily routines, my travel plans, my vulnerabilities. I thought about all the casual questions about my finances, my investments, my estate planning, questions that seemed reasonable coming from a financial planner who cared about his future mother-in-law's security. But what if they weren't casual at all? What if they were reconnaissance? By the time I pulled into my driveway, I'd worked myself into a cold fury. But I'd also made a decision. If Michael Bradford was playing games with me, I was going to play them right back, and I was going to win. Because here's what Michael didn't know about me. I might be a 63-year-old widow, but I was also a woman who'd turned a teacher's salary into an $8 million fortune without anyone noticing. I'd outmaneuvered IRS auditors, outsmarted investment scammers, and negotiated business deals with men who'd assumed I didn't understand basic math. If Michael thought he could manipulate me because I was old female and recently widowed, he was about to learn exactly how wrong a seemingly smart man could be. I walked into my house, made myself a cup of tea, and sat down at the kitchen table with my phone. First, I checked my bank accounts. Everything looked normal, but I made a note to ask Harold to go back further, look more carefully. Then I pulled up the Find My Friends app that Sophia had insisted I install last year. Just in case of emergencies, Mom, she'd said. I could see Sophia's location, her apartment in the Pearl District. She was probably making dinner, or more accurately, probably burning dinner while attempting to make dinner. My daughter had many talents, but cooking wasn't one of them. I hesitated, my finger hovering over her contact. I could call her right now, tell her what I'd found, warn her about Michael. But what would I say? Honey, I found a GPS tracker on my car, and I'm pretty sure your fiancé put it there. She'd want proof. She'd want to give Michael the benefit of the doubt, and he'd have some explanation ready, some story that would make me look paranoid. No, I needed more than a tracker. I needed to understand the full scope of whatever Michael was planning. My phone rang, making me jump. Harold's name appeared on the screen. "Charlotte," he said, and something in his voice made my stomach drop. "We need to talk. I found something." "Tell me." "Over the past 18 months, someone has been making small withdrawals from your checking account. Nothing large enough to trigger automatic alerts, but consistent. We're talking about $37,000 total." I felt like I'd been punched. $37,000? How is that possible? I monitor my accounts religiously. The withdrawals were coded to look like routine bill payments. Utilities, insurance premiums, property taxes, the kind of recurring expenses most people don't scrutinize closely. Whoever did this knew exactly how much you typically spend on monthly expenses and stayed just under the radar. "Harold," my voice came out as a whisper. The only people who would know that level of detail about my finances would be family members or my financial advisors. "Yes, Charlotte. This isn't the work of some random scammer. This is someone with intimate access to your financial information." After I hung up with Harold, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, staring at my cold tea and trying to process what I'd learned. $37,000. Stolen over 18 months. Right under my nose. My phone rang again. Susan Martinez this time. "Charlotte," she said without preamble, "I have the preliminary background check on Michael Bradford. You're going to want to sit down for this." "I'm already sitting." Michael Bradford does work for Premier Financial Planning, but he was only hired 8 months ago. Before that, he worked at Westside Financial Group in Seattle. He was let go after 9 months for what the HR department tactfully called inappropriate client interactions. Meaning what exactly? Meaning he was caught trying to manipulate elderly clients into questionable investment strategies that would benefit him personally. They didn't press charges, they just fired him and gave him a basic reference to avoid liability. Before Westside, he worked at another firm in Spokane. Same story, fired after less than a year for inappropriate conduct with clients. Jesus. I pressed my hand against my forehead. Is there more? Oh, there's more. Michael Bradford also has significant gambling debts. I'm talking about 6 figures owed to some very unpleasant people in Atlantic City. Based on court filings from a civil suit last year, we're looking at close to $300,000. $300,000 in gambling debts. Suddenly a lot of things made sense. Michael's urgency about my financial situation, his suggestions about estate planning and trusts, his interest in Sophia moving in with me the better to keep track of my daily routines and vulnerabilities. "Charlotte," Susan said carefully, "this man didn't fall in love with your daughter's sparkling personality. He fell in love with your financial statements." After I hung up with Susan, I did something I hadn't done in 2 years. I opened the closet in the bedroom I'd shared with Richard and pulled out his old cardigan, the ratty gray one I'd tried to throw away a dozen times, and he'd always rescued from the donation pile. I buried my face in it and cried. Not because I was scared. Not because I was worried about the money. I cried because my daughter, my sweet, trusting, repeatedly heartbroken daughter, was about to marry a man who was stealing from her mother and planning God knows what else. When I was done crying, I washed my face, put on fresh lipstick, and called Sophia. "Mom." She sounded cheerful, happy. "How were your meetings?" "Very productive. Henderson's acquisition went through, and Jason's pleased with our portfolio performance." "That's great. Listen, Michael and I were thinking about coming over tomorrow for brunch. Would that work?" Tomorrow was Sunday. Michael would probably want to check in, make sure I was safely home from my trip, see if everything had gone according to plan. "That would be lovely," I said warmly. "Why don't you come around 10? I'll make my famous blueberry pancakes." "Perfect. See you then, Mom. Love you." "Love you too, sweetheart." I hung up and looked at Richard's photo on my nightstand. "Richard," I said aloud, "I know what you'd say. You'd tell me to call the police, let them handle it, don't get involved." I paused as if waiting for his response. "But you're not here, and Sophia needs me. So I'm going to handle this my way." I climbed into bed, but sleep was a long time coming. My mind kept racing, planning, trying to anticipate what Michael might do next. The tracker was on a truck headed to Canada. By morning it would be hundreds of miles away, and Michael would have to decide, was it a malfunction? Had I discovered it and removed it? Or was I actually in Canada for some unknown reason? What would he do when he realized his carefully laid plans were going wrong? I didn't have to wait long to find out. Sunday morning I was sitting at my kitchen table in my bathrobe, drinking coffee from Richard's favorite mug, the one that said "World's Most Adequate Husband," that Sophia had given him as a joke years ago when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. Area code 78E. That was Alberta, Canada. My heart rate kicked up. Normally I would have let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. "Hello, Mrs. Morrison," a man's voice, professional and serious. "This is Sergeant Mitchell Wright with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police in Alberta, Canada." I nearly dropped my coffee mug. "Yes, this is Charlotte Morrison." I gripped the phone tighter, trying to keep my voice steady. "Is everything all right, Sergeant?" "Ma'am, we have a situation here that you might be able to help us with. Early this morning, we arrested a man named Vincent Torres at a truck stop outside Calgary. He was behaving suspiciously around one of the trucks, and when we searched him, we found something concerning." My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "What did you find?" "He was carrying a photograph of you, Mrs. Morrison, along with detailed personal information. your home address, your daily routine information about your car, and what appears to be surveillance notes dating back several weeks. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process what I was hearing. Mrs. Morrison, are you still there? Yes, I managed. Yes, I'm here. I don't understand. Who is Vincent Torres? Why would he have information about me? That's what we're trying to determine. When we confronted Mr. Torres about how he'd obtained this information, he became extremely agitated and started demanding to speak with someone named Michael about a payment he was owed. Michael. The name hung in the air between us like a bomb waiting to explode. Sergeant Wright, I said slowly, I think I need to tell you something important. This is going to sound completely insane, but please hear me out. For the next 20 minutes, I told Sergeant Wright everything. About Michael, about the tracker, about my decision to attach it to a truck headed to Canada, about the stolen money and the gambling debts and Susan's background check. To his credit, Sergeant Wright took notes without judgment and asked the kinds of detailed questions that suggested he'd dealt with this kind of case before. Mrs. Morrison, he said finally, based on what you've told me and what we've found here, I believe you may be the target of what we call a virtual kidnapping scheme. Virtual kidnapping. The term sounded like something from a science fiction movie. It's more common than you'd think, especially targeting elderly individuals with significant assets. The criminals track the victim's movements, wait until they're traveling alone, and then contact family members claiming the victim has been kidnapped and demanding immediate ransom payment. By the time anyone realizes it's fake, the money's long gone and the criminals have disappeared. The implications hit me like a physical blow. So Michael was planning to have this Vincent Torres grab me during my business trip. It appears that way. According to Torres's phone records, he was supposed to intercept you yesterday during your drive to Portland. The plan was to contact your family, presumably your daughter, claiming you'd been kidnapped and demanding $200,000 for your release. $200,000. A sum that would be painful but not devastating to my finances. A sum that Sophia would panic over but could conceivably access through her trust fund. A sum that Michael would probably offer to help with making himself the hero while my family was too traumatized to ask hard questions. It was diabolically clever, actually. The good news, Sergeant Wright continued, is that we caught Mr. Torres before anything happened. The tracker you placed on that truck led him to Canada instead of Portland, and when he couldn't find you, he became agitated enough to draw attention to himself. The truck driver noticed him acting strangely and called us. What happens now? Ma'am, given what we've uncovered, I strongly recommend you contact your local law enforcement immediately. Mr. Torres has been very cooperative. He's facing serious charges, and he's motivated to provide information about who hired him. But the person who hired him, this Michael, is probably expecting Torres to check in about the success of the operation. When he doesn't hear anything, they're going to realize something went wrong. And then what? And then they might try a different approach, Mrs. Morrison. People who are desperate enough to arrange kidnappings don't usually give up when Plan A fails. They move to Plan B. After I hung up with Sergeant Wright, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, staring at my coffee and watching the steam rise. Michael Bradford had tried to have me kidnapped. Not robbed. Not conned out of money through some elaborate financial scheme. Kidnapped. Actually physically abducted and held for ransom while my family was terrorized into paying money to criminals. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. Sophia would have been frantic when I disappeared. She would have called Michael immediately, her fiancé, her rock, the man she trusted most in the world, and he would have been right there to handle the situation, to deal with the kidnappers, to insist on paying the ransom himself to protect her from the trauma of negotiations. Sophia would have been grateful. I would have been traumatized. And Michael would have been $200,000 richer with a future wife who trusted him completely, and a mother-in-law who was now dependent on both of them for comfort and security. It was perfect. Almost elegant in its construction. Except for one small problem I'd found the tracker. I looked at the clock. 9:15. Sophia and Michael would be here in 45 minutes for brunch, expecting to find me cheerful and well-rested after my successful business trip. I had a choice to make. I could call Detective Walsh at Portland PD, the contact Sergeant Wright had given me. Let the professionals handle this. Have Michael arrested when he walked through my door. Or I could see this through. Let Michael dig his own grave a little deeper. Make sure I had every piece of evidence, every answer I needed before I pulled the trigger. I picked up my phone and called Detective Sarah Walsh. Detective Walsh, My name is Charlotte Morrison, and I was told to contact you by Sergeant Mitchell Wright with the RCMP. I believe my future son-in-law just tried to have me kidnapped. Detective Sarah Walsh arrived at my house 20 minutes later, driving an unmarked sedan and wearing jeans and a blazer. Clearly she'd been off duty when I called. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 45, with sharp eyes, and the kind of no-nonsense demeanor that came from years of dealing with criminals who thought they were smarter than the police. "Mrs. Morrison," she said, shaking my hand firmly at the door. "Sergeant Wright briefed me on the situation. May I come in?" I led her to the kitchen where my now cold coffee sat abandoned on the table. Sarah declined my offer of fresh coffee and instead pulled out a notebook and pen. "Let me make sure I understand the timeline correctly," she said. "Michael Bradford took your car for maintenance on Friday morning. You picked it up Friday evening and discovered the GPS tracker Saturday morning in a parking garage. You removed it and attached it to a truck heading to Canada. The RCMP arrested Vincent Torres early this morning, and he's claiming Michael hired him to kidnap you." "That's correct." "Mrs. Morrison, I've already pulled Torres's record. He's got priors for robbery assault and something we call virtual kidnapping. This isn't his first rodeo." Sarah leaned forward. "Based on what Sergeant Wright told me and the evidence the RCMP has collected, we have enough to arrest Michael Bradford right now. I can have officers here within 10 minutes. I shook my head. "I don't want you to arrest him yet." Sarah's eyebrows rose. "Mrs. Morrison, please call me Charlotte." "Charlotte," she said carefully, "this man hired someone to kidnap you. He's been stealing from you for months. He's dangerous and he's desperate. Why would you want to delay his arrest?" "Because I need to know if my daughter is involved." The words hung in the air between us. Sarah's expression softened slightly. "You think Sophia might be in on this?" "No," I said quickly. "No, I don't believe that. But I need to be sure, and I need to understand the full scope of what Michael's been planning. If we arrest him now, we get him for the kidnapping plot and the theft. But we won't know if there are other victims, other schemes, other people involved. Charlotte, investigating is our job, not yours." "I understand that, Detective. But I'm asking for a little time. Michael and Sophia are coming here for brunch in 20 minutes. Michael thinks his plan is still on track. Let me talk to them, feel out the situation. If I sense any danger, I'll signal you immediately." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, studying me. "You want to wear a wire? Can you arrange that quickly?" 10 minutes later, I had a small recording device clipped to my bra, hidden under my blouse. Sarah had positioned herself in my home office with a laptop, able to hear everything through wireless earbuds. "Charlotte," she said seriously before leaving the kitchen, "if at any point you feel unsafe, say the word Richard twice in a sentence. That's your panic code. I'll have backup here in under 3 minutes. Understand?" I nodded, touching the small device under my shirt. "I understand." At 9:55, I heard a car pull into my driveway. Through the kitchen window, I watched Michael's spotless BMW park next to my Lexus. He got out first, then walked around to open Sophia's door, always the gentleman. My daughter looked radiant in a casual sundress, her auburn hair loose around her shoulders. Michael wore khakis and a polo shirt, expensive sunglasses pushed up on his head. They looked like a magazine advertisement for successful young couples. I opened the door before they could knock, plastering on my brightest smile. "There you are. Come in, come in. I just started the pancakes." Sophia hugged me tight. "Mom, you look great. How was your trip?" "Wonderful, sweetheart. Very productive." I pulled back to look at her. "You look happy." "I am happy." She glanced at Michael, who was wiping his feet carefully on the doormat. "We both are." In the kitchen, I busied myself at the stove while Sophia set the table, and Michael leaned against the counter, watching me with that pleasant, attentive expression I'd once found endearing. "So, Charlotte," he said conversationally, "did Marco's service work out well? Any problems with the car during your drive?" I flipped a pancake, keeping my voice light. "No problems at all. The car ran beautifully. Thank you again for arranging that." "My pleasure. Where did you end up staying? I know you mentioned meetings on Saturday, but I wasn't sure if you drove back the same day." There it was, fishing for information about my whereabouts, trying to figure out why his tracker had suddenly started moving north toward Canada instead of staying in Portland. "Oh, I drove back Saturday evening," I said, placing a stack of golden pancakes on a serving platter. "The meetings went longer than expected, but I didn't want to pay for a hotel. You know how I am about unnecessary expenses." Michael's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "Absolutely. Though at your age, driving 3 hours after a full day of meetings must have been exhausting. I'm 63, Michael, not 93. I managed just fine. We sat down to eat, and for a while the conversation flowed normally. Sophia chattered about the wedding plans they'd finally decided on the Riverside Country Club for the reception. Michael added comments here and there, but I could feel him watching me, calculating. Mom, Sophia said, reaching for the maple syrup, Michael and I have been talking and we want to run something by you. Of course, honey. What is it? Sophia glanced at Michael, who nodded encouragingly. Well, we've been thinking about the future, about after the wedding, and we both feel strongly that you shouldn't be living alone in this big house. My hand tightened on my fork. I appreciate your concern, but I'm perfectly comfortable here. I know you are, Sophia said quickly, but it's such a big space for one person. And the maintenance, the yard work, all those stairs. We were thinking, what if you sold this place and bought something smaller, maybe one of those nice condos downtown or even a cottage near the lake? We'd help you with the transition, of course, Michael added smoothly. In fact, I've already looked into a few properties that might work. There's a beautiful 2-bedroom condo in the Pearl District, same building where Sophia lives, actually. You'd be close to us, close to restaurants and shops. Much easier to manage. I set down my fork very carefully. And what would happen to this house? Well, you'd sell it, obviously, Michael said. The real estate market is excellent right now. A house like this in this neighborhood, you could easily get $2 million, maybe more. $2 million that would need to be deposited, transferred, invested. $2 million that Michael, as my future son-in-law, and a financial planner would probably offer to help manage. That's very thoughtful of you both, I said evenly. But I'm not ready to leave this house. Richard and I built this place. We raised Sophia here. It's full of memories. Mom, Sophia said gently, I understand that, but holding on to the past isn't always healthy. Dad's been gone for over 2 years now. Don't you think he'd want you to move forward? The words stung, even though I knew she meant well, even though I could see Michael's influence in every syllable. I'll think about it, I said, which was the polite way of saying absolutely not. Michael's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and I saw something flicker across his face. Worry maybe, or frustration. Excuse me for just a moment. I need to take this. He stepped out onto the back patio, phone pressed to his ear. Through the window I could see him pacing, his body language tense. Mom, Sophia said quietly, are you okay? You seem, I don't know, stressed. I looked at my daughter, my beautiful, trusting daughter who had no idea she was engaged to a monster. I'm fine, sweetheart. Just tired from the trip. You're sure that's all you'd tell me if something was wrong, right? Could I not yet. Not until I had all the pieces. Michael returned, slipping his phone into his pocket. His smile was back in place, but it looked strained. Sorry about that. Work emergency. On a Sunday? I asked innocently. Unfortunately, yes. Charlotte, I hate to eat and run, but I need to head into the office for a few hours. Client situation, that can't wait. He leaned down to kiss Sophia's cheek. I'll call you later, honey. After Michael left, Sophia helped me clean up the dishes. Mom, I know Michael can be a little pushy sometimes. About the house, about your finances. But it really does come from a good place. He just wants to make sure you're taken care of. I know, sweetheart. I dried a plate carefully. Tell me something. How did you and Michael meet again? I know it was at some charity event, but I don't think you ever told me the details. Sophia's face lit up. It was the Children's Hospital Gala about 3 years ago. I was there representing my company. We'd bought a table. Michael was there networking. We got seated next to each other at dinner and we just clicked. He was so easy to talk to, so interested in everything I had to say. Not like those other guys who just talked about themselves the whole time. And when did he propose? 6 months ago. Remember, he took me to Multnomah Falls, got down on one knee right there on the bridge. It was so romantic. She sighed happily. I know I've made some bad choices in the past, Mom, but Michael is different. He's the one. I hugged her tight, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo. I love you, Sophia. I just want you to be happy and safe. I am, Mom. For the first time in a long time, I really am. After Sophia left, I found Sarah Walsh in my office, rewinding the recording of our conversation. Well, I asked, Michael's definitely nervous about something, Sarah said. That phone call he received, I'd bet money it was either Torres's handler checking in or someone wondering why Torres hasn't made contact. And the pressure to sell your house, classic financial exploitation of elderly relatives. I'm not elderly, I said automatically. Sarah smiled slightly. No, you're not, but that's how Michael sees you, as someone vulnerable he can manipulate. She closed her laptop. Charlotte, I strongly recommend we bring him in now, before he realizes how badly his plan has failed and decides to try something more drastic. Just give me a few more days, detective. Please. Sarah studied me for a long moment. Against my better judgment, I'm going to agree. But I'm also going to assign surveillance to Michael, and I want you to check in with me twice a day. If I don't hear from you by the scheduled times, I'm sending officers to check on you. Deal. Deal. After Sarah left, I sat in my office and stared at my phone. I had calls to make, difficult calls that would confirm my worst suspicions about Michael Bradford. But first, I needed to talk to someone who could help me understand the full financial picture. I called Marcus Webb. Marcus was a private investigator I'd hired 2 years ago when I was considering a business partnership. He was ex-FBI 50-something with the kind of methodical approach to gathering evidence that I appreciated. He was also one of the few men I'd met who didn't talk down to me because of my age or gender. Charlotte, he said when he answered, it's been a while. What can I do for you? Marcus, I need comprehensive surveillance on someone, and I need it done without them knowing they're being watched. Oh, this sounds like family trouble. For the next 30 minutes, I explained the Michael situation. Marcus listened without interrupting, and I could hear him typing notes on his keyboard. Charlotte, he said finally, what you're describing is a classic long-term elder fraud scheme, but with some unusual sophistication. Most con artists who target seniors are looking for quick scores, a few thousand here, a few thousand there. This Michael has been playing a 3-year game. That suggests either exceptional patience or exceptional desperation. My attorney found out he owes $300,000 to organized crime figures in Atlantic City. Marcus whistled. That would be the desperation part. Charlotte, people who owe that kind of money to those kinds of people. They're not just desperate, they're terrified. They'll do anything to get the money, including things they might not otherwise consider. Like hiring someone to kidnap their future mother-in-law. Exactly like that. Look, I can have surveillance on this guy within 24 hours. Full coverage where he goes, who he meets with, what he does. But I have to ask, why not just let the police handle this? Because I want to understand everything. The other victims, the full scope of his schemes, whether my daughter is in any danger. And because... I paused, trying to find the right words. Because I want him to know that he underestimated me. I want him to understand that he picked the wrong widow to prey on. There was a smile in Marcus's voice when he spoke. I'll have my team on him by this afternoon. And Charlotte, for what it's worth, I think this Michael Bradford is about to learn a very expensive lesson about underestimating Charlotte Morrison. My next call was to Jennifer Walsh, a forensic accountant who'd helped me untangle a complex investment fraud case several years ago. Jennifer had the ability to follow money trails through layers of shell companies and offshore accounts that would make most accountants weep with frustration. Jennifer, I need a complete financial investigation on someone. Bank records, credit reports, investment accounts, property holdings, everything you can legally access. Charlotte, you know I love a challenge, but this sounds like it's going to keep me busy for weeks. I need preliminary results in 48 hours and a complete report within a week. Jennifer laughed. That's ambitious. Money is not a concern. Accuracy and speed are my only priorities. In that case, send me everything you have on this person. I'll get started immediately. By noon, I had 3 professionals working to gather information that would either confirm my suspicions about Michael or reveal that the situation was even worse than I'd imagined. Now came the hardest part, acting normal while I waited for the investigation results. Sophia called that evening. Mom, are you free for lunch tomorrow? Just the 2 of us. I feel like we haven't had a proper mother-daughter day in forever. I'd love that, sweetheart. Noon at that Italian place you like? Perfect. Love you, Mom. Love you too, baby. I hung up and immediately called Sarah Walsh. Sophia wants to meet for lunch tomorrow. Just us. Good, Sarah said. That'll give you a chance to feel out whether she knows anything. I'll have an officer nearby just in case. You really think that's necessary? Charlotte, until we know the full scope of Michael's plans, I'm not taking any chances with your safety. Or Sophia's. That night I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Michael's charming smile and imagined Sophia's face when she learned the truth about him. I thought about Vincent Torres sitting in a Canadian jail cell and wondered how many other people Michael had involved in his schemes. Finally, around 2 in the morning, I gave up on sleep and went downstairs to Richard's study. I hadn't changed anything in here since he died. His books still lined the shelves. His reading glasses still sat on the desk next to a bookmark holding his place in a Tom Clancy novel he'd never finished. Sometimes I came in here late at night when I couldn't sleep just to feel close to him. "Richard," I said aloud to the empty room, "I'm scared. Not for myself, I can handle Michael. But for Sophia. When she finds out the truth, it's going to break her heart. She thought she'd finally found someone who loved her for herself, not for what she could give him. How do I protect her from that kind of pain?" The silence was my only answer. I pulled one of Richard's old engineering textbooks off the shelf and opened it randomly. A piece of paper fell out a note in Richard's handwriting. "Charlotte, remember, the strongest bridges aren't built overnight. They're built with patience, precision, and attention to every small detail. Love, R." He'd written it years ago, probably as a joke about some household project I'd been rushing through. But reading it now, it felt like a message. Patience, precision, attention to detail. That's how I would handle Michael Bradford. Not with rash confrontation, but with careful planning and irrefutable evidence. Monday morning, I met Sophia at Bella Italia, a cozy restaurant in the Pearl District with checkered tablecloths and the kind of Italian grandmother cooking that made you want to loosen your belt. Sophia was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table and scrolling through her phone. She looked up and smiled when she saw me standing to hug me tight. "Mom, you look nice. Is that a new blouse?" "This old thing, I've had it for years." I sat down and picked up the menu, even though I already knew what I wanted, the chicken marsala always. "How are the wedding plans coming?" "Actually, that's part of what I wanted to talk to you about." Sophia set down her phone, her expression turning serious. "Mom, I know you're contributing to the wedding and I'm so grateful. But Michael and I have been discussing it, and we don't want you to overextend yourself financially. The Riverside Country Club is expensive and, Sophia, honey, I can afford it." "I know you can, but Michael pointed out that you're on a fixed income now that Dad's pension stopped and with the cost of living going up." "Sophia," I reached across the table and took her hand. "I need to tell you something. My financial situation is not what you think it is." Her brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" I took a deep breath. This was a conversation I'd been avoiding for years, worried that knowing about my wealth might change how Sophia viewed her own accomplishments. But now, with Michael circling like a shark, she needed to know the truth. "Your father and I were very careful about money. You know that. What you don't know is that while your father was building bridges, I was building an investment portfolio. Sophia, I'm worth approximately $8 million. My daughter's mouth fell open. $8 million, give or take. Between real estate investments, stock holdings, and some commercial properties I acquired over the years. The income from those investments is substantial, more than enough to cover my living expenses and then some." "Mom, I had no idea. Why didn't you ever tell me?" "Because your father and I wanted you to grow up understanding the value of money, of working for what you want. We never wanted you to feel entitled or to rely on our wealth instead of building your own life." I squeezed her hand. "You've done that, sweetheart. You have a successful career, your own apartment, your own savings. We're so proud of you." Sophia was quiet for a long moment, processing. "Does Michael know?" "He knows I'm comfortable, but I've never discussed the specific numbers with him." "Why?" He's been asking a lot of questions lately about your finances, about whether you have enough for retirement, whether you're managing your money properly. I thought he was just being concerned, but now—" She trailed off, looking troubled. "Now you're wondering if there's another reason for his interest." No, of course not. Michael isn't like that. He's a financial planner. It's his nature to worry about these things." But she didn't sound entirely convinced. Our food arrived, giving me a moment to think. How much should I tell Sophia? How much could I tell her without breaking her heart prematurely? "Sweetheart," I said carefully, "I want to ask you something. Has Michael ever asked you about my will? About what would happen to my estate if something happened to me?" Sophia set down her fork, her expression shifting from confused to concerned. "Mom, what's going on? Why are you asking me this?" "Just humor me. Has he mentioned it once or twice? Said we should make sure your estate planning was up to date, that you had a power of attorney designated, that sort of thing. Mom, you're scaring me. Is something wrong? Are you sick? No, baby, I'm not sick. I'm just being cautious. I reached for her hand again. Sophia, I want you to promise me something. If anything happens to me, anything at all, I want you to call my attorney, Susan Martinez, immediately. Before you talk to anyone else, including Michael. Can you promise me that— Mom, you're really freaking me out right now. Promise me, Sophia. Okay, I promise. But please tell me what this is about. I wanted to. God, how I wanted to tell her everything. But I could already see the conflict in her eyes, the tension between her loyalty to me and her love for Michael. If I told her now without irrefutable proof, I'd be asking her to choose between us. And Michael would have time to manipulate her to spin his story, to paint me as a paranoid old woman who'd never approved of him. No, I needed to wait until I had everything. Until the evidence was so overwhelming that even Michael's smooth tongue couldn't explain it away. I'm just being a worried mother, I said, forcing a smile. You know how I get. Now tell me about the flowers you've chosen for the wedding. Are we still thinking roses? Sophia let me change the subject, but I could see the worry lingering in her eyes. She knew something was wrong, even if she couldn't put her finger on what. After lunch, I hugged her goodbye and watched her walk to her car. She looked back once, waving, and I waved back with a smile I didn't feel. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus Webb. Need to talk. Call me when you're alone. I waited until I was in my own car parked in the back corner of the lot before calling him back. Charlotte, Marcus said without preamble, you need to see what we found. Can you come to my office? I'll be there in 20 minutes. Marcus Webb's office was in a nondescript building in southeast Portland, the kind of place you could walk past 1,000 times without noticing, which was probably the point. He met me at the door, ushering me into a small conference room where a laptop sat open on the table, frozen on a surveillance photo. Charlotte, sit down. This is going to be rough. The photo showed Michael standing in a parking lot talking to two men. Even in the grainy image, I could see the tension in his body language. Who are they? I asked. Vincent Calabrese and Marco Rossi. Both have extensive criminal records, loan sharking, money laundering, assault. They're low-level enforcers for Tony Marchetti's organization out of Atlantic City. The people Michael owes money to. Exactly. This photo was taken yesterday afternoon, right after Michael left your house, claiming he had a work emergency. Marcus pulled up another image. Here he is entering a storage unit facility on the east side. We haven't been able to access the unit yet, but based on the amount of time he spent inside and the size of the unit, I'd say he's storing something significant. More photos followed Michael at a private mailbox service, Michael meeting with a woman I didn't recognize at a coffee shop, Michael loading cardboard boxes into the trunk of his BMW. We've also been monitoring his communications, Marcus said, pulling up a transcript on the laptop. This is from a phone call he made yesterday evening to an unlisted number in Miami. I leaned forward to read the transcript. Michael, we have a problem. The tracker stopped working. Unknown. What do you mean stopped working, Michael? I mean, it's in fucking Canada. She was supposed to be in Portland. Something went wrong. Unknown. Did she find it, Michael? I don't know. Maybe. She's acting normal, but I can't be sure. Known. You need to be sure. We have people waiting for their money. They're not patient people. Michael. I know. I'm working on it. I'll have it by the end of the month. I just need a little more time. Unknown. Time is what you don't have. Figure it out or they'll figure it out for you. The call ended. I sat back, my hands shaking. He's planning something else. Another way to get the money. It looks that way, Marcus agreed. Charlotte, I know you wanted more time to investigate, but I think you need to consider going to the police now. Michael is under pressure from dangerous people. That makes him unpredictable. I need to know if there are other victims, other women he's hurt. Marcus pulled up another file on his computer. That's the other thing I wanted to show you. We ran a deep background on Michael Bradford going back further than the initial search. Charlotte, Michael Bradford isn't his real name. It's his fourth identity in the past 12 years. My blood ran cold. Fourth, his real name is Derek Morrison, age 42, not 37. He's been running this same con for over a decade, targeting wealthy widows and elderly women with substantial assets. We've identified 3 previous victims, and I suspect there are more we haven't found yet. Marcus pulled up photographs of 3 women along with their case files. Margaret Wellington, 74, Sarasota, Florida. Derek, using the name David Mitchell, convinced her to invest her retirement savings in a fake real estate venture. She lost $460,000, too ashamed to press charges. The next photo showed a determined-looking woman in her early 60s. Helen Rodriguez, 62, Phoenix, Arizona. Derek, calling himself Marcus Brennan, posed as a financial advisor and convinced her to liquidate her late husband's insurance payout for exclusive investment opportunities. She lost $320,000. The third photo made my breath catch a woman not much older than Sophia, with sad eyes and a tight smile. Janet Pierce, 58, Charleston, South Carolina. Derek's most recent victim before you. He convinced her to liquidate her business to invest in his hedge fund. She lost everything: her savings, her business, her house. She's currently living with her adult daughter and working retail. I stared at the photos, feeling sick. These women trusted him. Just like you trusted him. Just like Sophia trusts him. Marcus closed the laptop. Charlotte, this man is a professional predator. He's patient, sophisticated, and extremely dangerous. The fact that he's moved to kidnapping suggests he's getting desperate, which makes him even more unpredictable. I want to talk to them. These women. I want to hear their stories. I can arrange that, but Charlotte, please consider that every day we wait is another day Michael is planning something. Another day Sophia is engaged to a sociopath who sees her as a meal ticket. I stood up, grabbing my purse. Set up calls with these women. I want to talk to each of them. And Marcus, keep the surveillance going. I want to know every move he makes. That evening, I sat in my home office and spoke to 3 women whose lives had been destroyed by the man who was planning to marry my daughter. Margaret Wellington's voice was frail but steady. He was like a son to me. My own children had moved away, and David, that's what he called himself. He visited regularly, helped me with things around the house, listened to my stories. When he suggested the investment opportunity, I trusted him completely. Why wouldn't I? He'd shown me nothing but kindness. What happened when you discovered the truth? I asked gently. I confronted him. He cried. Actually cried and apologized, said he'd made terrible mistakes and would pay me back. I believed him. I gave him more time. And then one day I went to his office and found out he'd moved. New city, new identity, gone like smoke. Her voice broke. I was so ashamed. My children found out and wanted to call the police, but I couldn't bear it. Everyone would know how foolish I'd been. Helen Rodriguez was angrier. That bastard took everything my husband left me. Everything we'd worked for our whole lives. And you know what the worst part is? I knew something was off. I had instincts telling me to be careful, but I ignored them because I was lonely, and he was charming, and he made me feel like I mattered. Did you report him to the police? By the time I realized what had happened, he was already gone, disappeared. I hired a private investigator, but the man I knew as Marcus Brennan didn't exist. It was like trying to catch a ghost. Janet Pierce's story was the most heartbreaking. I lost my business. 20 years of building something from nothing, and he convinced me to throw it all away. My daughter has been wonderful, but I'm 58 years old and working as a cashier at Target. This wasn't how my life was supposed to go. I'm so sorry, I said. If I can stop him, if I can help you get some justice, I will. Then do something I couldn't, Janet said fiercely. Don't let him charm his way out of it. Don't let him make excuses. And for God's sake, don't let him hurt anyone else. After the calls ended, I sat in the darkness of my office and thought about those 3 women, about how Derek Morrison had targeted them, gained their trust, and systematically destroyed their financial security, and about how he was planning to do the same thing to me. Except I wasn't Margaret or Helen or Janet. I was Charlotte Morrison, and I'd spent 2 years grieving alone in this house. 2 years feeling helpless and vulnerable. But I wasn't helpless, and I was done feeling vulnerable. I picked up my phone and called Sarah Walsh. Detective, it's Charlotte. I need to talk to you about moving forward with Michael's arrest, but I want to do it my way. Tuesday morning, Jennifer Walsh, my forensic accountant, not to be confused with Detective Sarah Walsh, called with her preliminary findings. Charlotte, I've gone through 18 months of Michael Bradford's financial records, and what I've found is disturbing. Tell me. He's drowning in debt. The gambling losses are worse than your attorney initially found, closer to $400,000 now. He's been borrowing from multiple sources to pay off the interest on his Atlantic City debts, which means he's basically robbing Peter to pay Paul. He's also got credit card debt, a car payment he can barely afford, and rent that's 3 months overdue. How has he been hiding all this? Very carefully. He maintains 2 sets of accounts. One legitimate checking account where his paycheck gets deposited, and a web of other accounts and credit cards he uses for his actual spending. The legitimate account is what he'd show Sophia or anyone else who asked. The rest is hidden. What about income? He must be making decent money at Premier Financial. That's the thing, Charlotte. His salary at Premier Financial is barely $60,000 a year. Before that, he was making even less. There's no way his legitimate income could support the lifestyle he's portraying: the BMW, the expensive clothes, the dinners at nice restaurants. He's living entirely on credit and whatever money he's been stealing from you, and presumably others. So he's desperate. Desperately desperate. Based on some court documents I found, Tony Marchetti's organization has already filed a civil suit against him. If he doesn't come up with the money soon, that civil suit is going to become a criminal problem. Or worse. Worse, Charlotte, people who owe this kind of money to organized crime don't usually end up in court. They end up in the hospital, or worse. After hanging up with Jennifer, I sat at my kitchen table and tried to piece together Michael's timeline. He'd met Sophia 3 years ago, probably targeting her specifically because of her connection to me. He'd spent 3 years building trust, becoming part of the family, positioning himself to access my finances. The theft had been going on for 18 months, small, careful withdrawals that I'd never noticed. But that wasn't enough. He needed more, and he needed it faster, hence the kidnapping plot. My phone rang. Marcus Webb. Charlotte, we have a situation. Michael just bought a one-way ticket to Miami departing this Friday. My heart sank. He's running. That's my assessment. He's also been making trips to his storage unit, removing boxes. I think he's liquidating whatever he's got stashed there and preparing to disappear. What about Sophia? Is he taking her with him? There's no ticket for her. Charlotte, I think Michael is planning to take whatever money he can get and leave Sophia behind. She's served her purpose getting him close to you. Now that his plan has failed, she's just another loose end. I felt a cold rage settle over me. That son of a bitch! There's more. The 2 men he met with, Calabrese and Rossi, they've been watching your house. We've spotted them driving by 3 times in the past 2 days. I think Michael's employers are getting impatient. Are Sophia and I in danger? Possibly. These are not people who accept excuses. If Michael can't pay, they might decide to collect directly from you. Detective Walsh needs to know about this. Already called her. She's coordinating with local FBI on the organized crime angle. Charlotte, you need to be very careful. Don't go anywhere alone and keep your doors locked. That afternoon, Sophia called. Mom, can I come over? I need to talk to you about something. 20 minutes later, she was sitting at my kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea she wasn't drinking. She looked troubled. What is it, sweetheart? It's Michael. He's been acting strange lately. Stressed, distracted. He says everything's fine, but I can tell something's wrong. And yesterday I found something on his computer. My heart rate kicked up. What did you find? Flight information. A one-way ticket to Miami for this Friday. When I asked him about it, he said it was for a work conference. But Mom, I checked, there's no financial planning conference in Miami this weekend. I think he lied to me. I chose my words carefully. What are you thinking? I don't know. Maybe I'm being paranoid. Maybe there's a perfectly reasonable explanation. She finally looked up at me, and I could see the doubt in her eyes. Mom, you don't like Michael, do you? It's not that I don't like him. Be honest. Please. I took a breath. Sophia, I think there are things about Michael that you don't know. Things that concern me. Like what? This was it. The moment I'd been avoiding. I could either tell her everything now without all the evidence I'd been gathering, or I could wait a few more days and risk losing her trust entirely. Sophia, I need you to trust me for just a few more days. Can you do that? Don't make any major decisions about the wedding. Don't tell Michael about our conversation today. And please, please be careful. Mom, you're scaring me. I know, baby, but I promise everything will make sense very soon. Just trust me. After Sophia left, I called Sarah Walsh. We need to move on this. Michael's planning to run on Friday, and I think Sophia's starting to figure out something's wrong. If he realizes she's on to him, there's no telling what he might do. Agreed. I've been coordinating with the FBI on the organized crime angle, and we've got enough to bring him in. The question is when and how. I have an idea, I said, but it's risky. I'm listening. I want to invite Michael over for dinner, Thursday night, just him and me. I'll tell him I want to discuss something important about the wedding, about my financial contribution. He'll think I'm finally ready to make him a beneficiary or give him access to my accounts. Charlotte, He'll come, Sarah. His flight is Friday morning, which means Thursday night is his last chance to get money from me. He'll be desperate enough to take the risk. And what happens when he shows up? You'll be here with backup. I'll get him to talk to incriminate himself. And then we'll end this. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. This is a terrible idea. But you'll do it against my better judgment, yes. But Charlotte, you're wearing a wire. I'm positioning officers throughout your property, and at the first sign of trouble, we're coming in. Deal. Deal. I hung up and immediately called Michael. Charlotte. His voice was warm, friendly, with just a hint of tension underneath. How are you? I'm well, Michael. Listen, I was wondering if you could come over for dinner Thursday evening. Just you and me. I want to discuss something important about the wedding and about my financial planning for the future. There was a pause and I could almost hear him calculating. Of course, I'd be happy to. What time? 7 o'clock. I'll be there. Charlotte, I'm so glad you called. I've been wanting to talk to you about some investment opportunities that I think would really benefit you. I'm sure you have, I said dryly. I'll see you Thursday. After I hung up, I sat at my kitchen table and looked at Richard's photo on the refrigerator, the two of us at Sophia's college graduation, our arms around our daughter, all three of us grinning at the camera. Richard, I whispered, I hope I know what I'm doing. Thursday morning arrived with an unseasonable chill. I woke at dawn, my stomach tight with anticipation and dread. Tonight everything would come to a head. Tonight I would either get the confession I needed or I would fail and possibly put myself in danger. I spent the morning preparing both mentally and practically. I called Sarah Walsh to confirm our plan. Officers will be positioned around your property by 6:30, she said. I'll be in the surveillance van 2 houses down. You'll be wearing 2 recording devices, 1 audio, 1 video. The video is a button camera on your cardigan. Try to keep Michael in frame as much as possible. What if he becomes aggressive? Then you say the panic word Richard twice in a sentence, and we come in immediately. Charlotte, I can't stress this enough. At the first sign of physical danger, you get out of that house. Don't try to be a hero. I understand. Do you? Because I'm starting to think you've watched too many detective movies. This is real life, and Michael Bradford is a desperate man who's about to lose everything. Desperate men are dangerous. After we hung up, I went to the kitchen and started preparing dinner. Roast chicken, Michael's favorite, with garlic mashed potatoes and roasted vegetables. Apple pie for dessert made from scratch using my mother's recipe. If this was going to be our last meal together, at least it would be a good one. At 2 o'clock, Marcus Webb called. Charlotte, Michael's been busy today. He went to 3 different banks this morning, probably closing out accounts. He also stopped by a check cashing place and came out with what looked like a thick envelope. I'm guessing cash. He's liquidating everything he can before he runs. That's my assessment. Charlotte, he's desperate and he's dangerous. Please be careful tonight. I will be. Marcus, thank you for everything. Thank me when this is over and you're safe. At 4 o'clock, Sophia called. Mom, can I come over? Michael said he's having dinner with you tonight and I wanted to see you before what, honey? I don't know. I have this weird feeling, like something's about to change. My heart ached. Sophia, sweetheart, I need you to trust me. Everything I'm doing is to protect you. You understand that, right? Mom, what's going on? Why won't you tell me? After tonight, I'll tell you everything. I promise. But right now, I need you to stay at your apartment. Can you do that for me? You're really freaking me out. I know, baby. But please, stay home tonight. Lock your doors. And if Michael calls, you don't tell him we talked. Mom. Please, Sophia, trust me. After a long pause, she said quietly, Okay, I trust you. At 6 o'clock, I began getting dressed. I chose a soft blue cardigan, the one with buttons large enough to hide the tiny camera Sarah had given me, and a pair of comfortable slacks. I wanted to look approachable, maternal, not threatening. I applied makeup carefully, my hands steadier than I expected. Lipstick, a touch of blush mascara. In the mirror, I looked like what I was, a woman in her 60s, preparing for dinner with her future son-in-law. But my eyes told a different story. They were hard, determined. The eyes of someone who'd been underestimated for the last time. At 6:30, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Sarah Walsh and a young tech officer named Danny. Final equipment check, Sarah said briskly, coming inside. Danny set her up. For the next 15 minutes, Danny attached recording devices to me with practiced efficiency. The button camera on my cardigan and audio recorder clipped to my bra, and a small panic button disguised as a pendant on my necklace. "You press this," Danny explained, "and every officer on this operation gets an immediate alert. They'll be through your door in under 30 seconds. "Let's hope it doesn't come to that," I said. Sarah pulled me aside. "Charlotte, last chance to back out. We can arrest Michael tonight without this dinner. We have enough evidence." But not a confession. Not in his own words admitting what he did and why. I need that, Sarah. For Sophia. She needs to hear it from him. Sarah studied my face, then nodded slowly. "All right, but you follow the plan. You get him talking, you get the confession, and you get out. No heroics." "No heroics," I agreed. After they left, I set the dining room table with my good china. The same Linux set I'd used for Sunday dinner with Michael and Sophia just days ago. The irony wasn't lost on me. At 6:55, I checked the chicken one last time, adjusted a fork on the table, and took a deep breath. The doorbell rang at exactly 7 o'clock. Michael was nothing if not punctual. I opened the door with a warm smile. "Michael, come in. Dinner's almost ready." He stepped inside, and I caught a whiff of his expensive cologne. He was dressed casually, but expensively designer jeans, a crisp button-down shirt, Italian leather shoes, playing the part of the successful son-in-law to perfection. But his eyes were different, harder, more calculating. The charming mask was slipping. "Charlotte, something smells wonderful." He followed me to the dining room, his gaze sweeping the room. "Just the two of us tonight." "Just us. I thought it would be nice to have an adult conversation without Sophia present. You know how emotional she gets about wedding planning." "Of course." He sat down at the place I'd set for him directly across from me. Perfect positioning for the button camera. I served dinner playing the role of gracious hostess. We made small talk about the weather, about the food, about nothing important. All the while I could feel the weight of the recording devices, the knowledge that police officers were positioned around my property waiting. Finally, as I served the apple pie, I said, "Michael, I asked you here because I've been thinking about what you and Sophia said on Sunday, about the house, about my financial future." His attention sharpened. "Oh, you were right. I have been holding on to the past. This house is too big for one person, and managing my finances has become complicated. I'm not as sharp as I used to be." I hated saying the words, even though they were lies designed to draw him out. But I forced myself to look uncertain, vulnerable. "I'm glad you're finally ready to address this, Charlotte." He leaned forward, his voice warm with false sympathy. "It's not easy to admit when we need help, but that's what family is for. I've been thinking about your offer to help manage my investments, and I've decided to accept." His eyes lit up actual, genuine excitement that he couldn't quite hide. "That's wonderful, Charlotte. I think you're making a very wise decision. We should set up a meeting with my firm next week. Actually, I was hoping we could discuss it tonight. I have some documents I'd like you to look at. My portfolio statements, my investment accounts. I want your professional opinion." "Of course, I'd be happy to review everything." I stood up, smoothing my cardigan. "They're in my office. I'll just be a moment." I walked to Richard's study, my heart pounding. This was it. The moment when Michael would either take the bait or sense the trap. I returned with a folder, but it wasn't my real financial documents. It was a fabricated portfolio that Marcus Webb had helped me create, showing accounts worth nearly $10 million, all easily accessible, all just waiting for the right person to transfer them. I set the folder in front of Michael. "This is everything. I know it's a lot, but I trust you." He opened the folder, and I watched his face carefully. His eyes moved over the numbers, and I could see him calculating, planning, almost salivating. "Charlotte," he said slowly, I had no idea your holdings were this extensive. Richard and I were very careful about our investments, but now with him gone, it all feels overwhelming. I need someone I can trust to help me make sense of it all." "And you trust me?" "Of course. You're going to be family soon, and you're a professional. Why wouldn't I trust you?" Something flickered across his face, guilt maybe, or a brief moment of conscience, but it passed quickly. "Charlotte, I'm honored that you're willing to put this kind of faith in me. With your permission, I'd like to restructure some of these investments. Move them into more aggressive growth portfolios. The market is strong right now, and I think we could see significant returns. And you would manage these accounts. With your authorization, yes. I'd set up a power of attorney so I could make transactions on your behalf. It would be much easier than having to get your signature on everything. A power of attorney? I kept my voice innocent, curious. That's a lot of control to give someone. It's standard practice for elderly clients who need help managing their finances. There it was again, elderly. As if being 63 made me incompetent. Michael, can I ask you something? I set down my fork, meeting his eyes directly. Why are you really doing this? He blinked. I'm sorry. Helping me. Offering to manage my investments. Is it really because you care about my financial well-being? Or is there another reason? His smile didn't waver, but his eyes went cold. Charlotte, I'm not sure what you're implying. I'm not implying anything. I'm asking directly. What do you want from me? The mask slipped a little more. I want to help you. That's all. Is it because I've been doing some research, Michael? Or should I call you Derek? The change in his expression was instantaneous. The friendly concern vanished, replaced by something sharp and dangerous. I don't know what you're talking about. Derek Morrison, age 42, not 37, previously known as David Mitchell Marcus Brennan and God knows how many other names. You've been running this con for 12 years, targeting wealthy widows. Margaret Wellington in Florida, Helen Rodriguez in Arizona, Janet Pierce in South Carolina, and now me. He stood up slowly, his chair scraping against the floor. Charlotte, I think you've been under a lot of stress. Perhaps you're confused. I'm not confused. I found the GPS tracker you put on my car. I spoke to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police about Vincent Torres, the man you hired to kidnap me. I know about your gambling debts. I know about the $300,000 you owe to Tony Marchetti's organization. And I know about the $37,000 you've stolen from my accounts over the past 18 months. His face went white, then red. You can't prove any of that. Can't I? I reached into my cardigan pocket and pulled out my phone, placing it on the table. Let me play you something interesting. I pressed play on a recording Marcus had sent me. Michael's phone conversation about the tracker failing, about needing money urgently, about dangerous people who weren't patient. As his own voice filled the dining room, I watched Michael's face cycle through shock fury and finally cold calculation. You've been investigating me, he said quietly. Investigating, I've been protecting myself and my daughter. Sophia doesn't know about any of this, does she? A cruel smile touched his lips. Poor Sophia. She has no idea that her mother is a paranoid old woman who sees conspiracies everywhere. Don't. My voice came out harder than I intended. Don't you dare use my daughter against me. Why not? She's been very useful so far. Sweet, trusting Sophia, so eager to believe that someone finally loved her for herself. It was almost too easy. The casual cruelty in his voice made my blood boil. You never loved her. Love? He laughed, actually laughed. Charlotte, love is for people who can afford it. I needed money and Sophia was my ticket to you. That's all she ever was. So what was the plan? Marry her, get control of my finances, and then what, divorce her? Or were you planning something more permanent? His eyes narrowed. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that a wealthy widow dying in an accident while her grieving daughter inherits everything with her loving husband there to help her through her grief and manage all that money would be very convenient for you. You're insane. Am I? Then explain Vincent Torres. Explain the kidnapping plot. If you just wanted money, you could have continued stealing small amounts, but you needed a lot of money fast. Why? You know why. You said it yourself, I owe money to people who don't accept excuses. How much time do they give you? His jaw clenched. End of the month. I either pay them back or... He didn't finish the sentence. Or they kill you. Or they hurt me in ways that make me wish I was dead. He sat back down, suddenly looking exhausted. Charlotte, you have to understand I didn't want to do any of this. But when you owe that kind of money to those kinds of people, you don't have choices. You do what you have to do to survive. And what about your other victims, Margaret, Helen, Janet? They were just trying to survive too. But you destroyed their lives. They were old. They didn't need that money. They were just sitting on it, doing nothing with it. The callousness of his words took my breath away. They earned that money. They saved it, invested it, built security for their future. And you stole it. I borrowed it. You stole it. And you were planning to steal from me. To kidnap me, terrorize my daughter, and then what? How was this supposed to end, Michael? He looked at me for a long moment, and something in his expression shifted. The pretense was gone. The mask had finally fallen away completely. You want the truth, Charlotte, fine. Here's the truth. The kidnapping was supposed to be quick and clean. Torres grabs you during your Portland trip, makes the ransom call. Sophia panics and calls me. I negotiate with the kidnappers, pay the $200,000, which I would have immediately gotten back from Torres minus his cut, and you're released. Everyone thinks I'm a hero. Sophia trusts me completely. You're so traumatized that you become dependent on both of us. And then in a few months, I start suggesting changes to your estate planning. Power of attorney. Making Sophia your primary beneficiary with me as co-trustee. Little by little, I get control. And if I refused, his smile was cold. Elderly people have accidents, Charlotte. They fall downstairs. They forget to turn off the stove. They take too many pills by mistake. Tragic, but these things happen. My hands were shaking, but my voice stayed steady. You were planning to kill me. Only if necessary, and only after ensuring Sophia would inherit everything with me there to help her manage it. It would have been quick, Charlotte. Painless. More mercy than most people get. The recording devices hidden on my cardigan were capturing every word. In the surveillance van down the street, Sarah Walsh and her team were hearing everything. But I needed more. I needed him to admit to everything, the theft, the other victims, the full scope of his crimes. What about the money you've already stolen from me? The $37,000? Michael shrugged. That was just practice. Testing how carefully you monitored your accounts. You're more observant than the others, I'll give you that. But not observant enough. The others. Margaret, Helen, Janet. Tell me about them. Why, what does it matter? It matters to me, it matters to them. They deserve to have someone acknowledge what was done to them. He laughed bitterly. Fine. You want a confession? Here's your confession. Margaret Wellington was my first. I was young, stupid, didn't really know what I was doing. I took too much too quickly and I had to run. Learned my lesson there. Helen Rodriguez was better, slower, more careful. But she got suspicious, hired an investigator. Had to disappear before I could finish the job. Janet Pierce was perfect. I got everything I wanted and she was too broken to fight back. She just accepted it. And how much money did you steal from them in total? Including you, about $3.2 million over 12 years. Not bad for a career, though, considerably less than I'd hoped. $3.2 million. 3 women's life savings, their security, their futures, all stolen by the man sitting across from me, calmly eating apple pie. What about Sophia? Did you ever feel anything real for her? For the first time, something like genuine emotion crossed his face. In the beginning, maybe. She's beautiful, kind, funny. In another life, I might have actually loved her. But I can't afford love, Charlotte. Love is a luxury for people who aren't drowning in debt to the mob. So you used her. I used her. Just like I used you. Just like I used all of them. Because that's what people like me do. We find vulnerabilities and we exploit them. People like you. You mean sociopaths. I prefer survivors. But call it what you want. I took a breath, steadying myself. And the flight to Miami tomorrow. You were planning to run. The plan failed. Torres got arrested. You figured it out. Time to cut my losses and disappear before Marchetti's people decide to collect their debt in blood instead of money. What about Sophia? Were you even going to tell her you were leaving? Why would I? She served her purpose. By the time she realizes I'm gone, I'll have a new name, a new city, a new target. That's how this works. Not this time. I stood up, my voice shaking with barely controlled fury. This time you picked the wrong widow. This time, someone fought back. Michael's eyes narrowed. What did you do, Charlotte? I recorded everything. Every word you just said is on tape, and I'm not the only one who heard it. His face went pale. You're wearing a wire. Actually, I'm wearing 2. Audio and video. And there are police officers positioned all around this property just waiting for my signal. He stood up fast enough that his chair toppled backward. You bitch. You cunning old bitch. Not so old that I couldn't outwit you. Not so helpless that I couldn't protect myself and my daughter. I pressed the panic button hidden in my pendant. And definitely not someone you should have underestimated. For a moment, Michael just stared at me, and I saw the exact instant he made his decision. His eyes darted toward the back door, calculating his chances. "Don't," I warned. "There's nowhere to run." But he ran anyway. Michael lunged for the kitchen, heading for the back door. I heard him crash through, heard his footsteps pounding across the patio. And then I heard Sarah Walsh's voice amplified through a megaphone. "Derek Morrison, this is the Portland Police Department. You are surrounded. Get on the ground now." I walked to the back door and looked out. Michael had made it about 15 feet across my backyard before 4 police officers emerged from their positions around the property. He tried to turn to run in another direction, but there was nowhere to go. He went down hard in Richard's flower garden, tackled by 2 officers. The prized roses that Richard had spent years cultivating cushioned his fall. I couldn't help but think Richard would have appreciated the irony. Sarah Walsh appeared at my side. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," and I was. My hands were steady now, my voice calm. "Did you get everything?" "Every word, audio and video. Charlotte, that was incredibly reckless and incredibly brave." She squeezed my shoulder. "But please never do anything like that again." Through the window, I watched as they handcuffed Michael and read him his rights. He was screaming something, his face red with rage, but I couldn't make out the words over the police radio chatter. "What happens now?" I asked. Now we book him on conspiracy to commit kidnapping, wire fraud, theft, and about a dozen other charges. Between the RCMP's evidence, your recording, and the financial crimes, we can prove he's looking at 20 to 30 years minimum, and that's before the FBI gets involved with the organized crime angle. And Sophia, Sarah's expression softened. "You need to call her, before she hears about this, some other way." I called Sophia from Sarah's office at the police station an hour later. My hands were shaking as I pressed her contact. She answered on the first ring. "Mom, I saw on the news police at your house. Are you okay?" "What happened?" "I'm fine, sweetheart. I'm at the police station. Can you meet me here?" The police station. "Mom, what's going on? Where's Michael? He was supposed to have dinner with you." "Sophia, honey, just come to the station. I'll explain everything when you get here." 20 minutes later, Sophia rushed into the police station, her hair disheveled, still wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt. She looked terrified. "Mom!" She threw her arms around me. I was so scared. "The news said there was an arrest at your address." "Sophia, baby, come sit down. We need to talk." I led her to a private conference room. Sarah Walsh had offered to stay with us, but I declined. This conversation needed to be just between mother and daughter. For the next hour, I told Sophia everything. About the GPS tracker, about Vincent Torres and the kidnapping plot, about Michael's real identity, and his other victims, about the money he'd stolen and the debts he owed. I showed her the recordings, played her Michael's confession, explained how he'd been using her to get to me. With every revelation, I watched my daughter's face crumble a little more. By the time I finished, she was crying silently, tears streaming down her face. "He never loved me," she whispered. "It was all a lie. Everything was a lie." "Oh, sweetheart." I pulled her close, letting her sob against my shoulder. "I'm so sorry. I wanted to tell you sooner, but I needed proof. I needed you to hear it from him. I was going to marry him, Mom. I was going to spend my life with him. How could I be so stupid?" "You weren't stupid. You were human. You were looking for love, and he was a professional con artist. This is what he does. He finds good people and exploits their desire to trust, to love, to believe the best in others." "But you saw through him. Why couldn't I?" "Because I wasn't in love with him. Because I had distance and perspective. And because I've lived long enough to know that when something seems too good to be true, it usually is." I stroked her hair like I used to when she was a little girl. "But Sophia, listen to me. This doesn't mean you should stop trusting people. It doesn't mean love isn't real. It just means you met the wrong person. How do I come back from this? How do I ever trust anyone again? One day at a time, with therapy, with support, with patience. You're strong, Sophia, stronger than you know. And you're not alone. I'm here. I'll always be here." We sat there for a long time holding each other while Sophia cried. And I let myself cry too, for my daughter's broken heart, for the innocence she'd lost, for the future she'd imagined that would never be. 3 days later, Michael Derek Morrison was arraigned on multiple charges. I sat in the courtroom with Sophia on one side and Sarah Walsh on the other, watching as they led him in wearing an orange jumpsuit and handcuffs. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. The expensive clothes and charming smile were gone, replaced by prison-issue clothing and a sullen expression. His eyes found mine across the courtroom, and for a moment we just stared at each other. Then he looked away first. The prosecutor read the charges: conspiracy to commit kidnapping, wire fraud, theft by deception, elder abuse, and multiple counts of identity fraud. The list went on and on. Derek's public defender, he couldn't afford a private attorney anymore, entered a plea of not guilty. But we all knew it was just a formality. The evidence against him was overwhelming. As they led him away, Sophia grabbed my hand. "Is it really over?" "The legal process is just beginning, but the danger is over. He can't hurt you anymore." "He already hurt me, Mom. He broke my heart." "Hearts heal, baby. I promise you they heal." The trial happened 4 months later. In January, I sat in that same courtroom, but this time for the actual proceedings. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Patricia Hernandez, built her case methodically and devastatingly. She called Vincent Torres first. He testified about being hired by Derek Morrison to kidnap me, about the detailed information he'd been given about the plan to demand ransom from Sophia. Then came testimony from Margaret Wellington, Helen Rodriguez, and Janet Pierce, the 3 women Derek had destroyed before targeting me. I'd never met them in person before, but I'd spoken to each of them multiple times over the past months. We'd formed an unlikely support group, 4 women connected by the same predator. Margaret's testimony was heartbreaking. "He was like a son to me. I trusted him with everything, and he stole not just my money, but my ability to trust anyone ever again." Helen was angrier, her voice shaking with barely controlled fury as she described how Derek had convinced her to liquidate her late husband's insurance policy. Janet's testimony was the most damaging. She explained how Derek had convinced her to sell her business, drain her retirement accounts, and invest everything in his fake hedge fund. "I lost everything. I'm 58 years old, living with my daughter, working retail. This is not how my life was supposed to go." By the time the prosecution rested their case, Derek looked like a man who knew he was doomed. His defense attorney tried to argue that Derek had been coerced by the mob, that he'd been acting under duress, that he deserved leniency. But Patricia Hernandez destroyed that argument in her closing statement. "Derek Morrison is not a victim. He is a predator who spent 12 years targeting vulnerable women. He didn't steal just their money. He stole their sense of security, their ability to trust their dignity. He destroyed lives without remorse, and when he was finally caught, his only regret was that his plan failed." The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. At sentencing, Judge Catherine Harrison looked at Derek with unconcealed disgust. "Mr. Morrison, you are a parasite who preys on the vulnerable. You have shown no remorse, no conscience, and no indication that you would stop if given the opportunity. This court sentences you to 28 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole for 15 years. Additionally, you are ordered to pay full restitution to all your victims, plus interest and penalties." 28 years. Derek would be 70 years old before he could even apply for parole. As they led him away, he looked at me one last time, and this time I smiled. 6 months after Derek's sentencing, I stood in front of a new office building in downtown Portland. The sign above the door read, "The Morrison Foundation for Elder Fraud Prevention." Sophia stood beside me holding a pair of oversized scissors for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. She looked beautiful and confident in a navy suit, her hair pulled back in a professional bun. The past months hadn't been easy for her. There had been therapy tears, anger, and grief. But she'd emerged stronger with a new sense of purpose. "Ready, Mom?" she asked, smiling. "Ready, sweetheart." We cut the ribbon together while cameras flashed and a small crowd applauded. Margaret Wellington was there along with Helen Rodriguez and Janet Pierce. Detective Sarah Walsh had come, and Marcus Webb and even Sergeant Mitchell Wright had flown down from Canada for the occasion. Inside the foundation offices were bright and welcoming. We'd used Derek's restitution payments, what little had been recovered from his assets, as seed money, and I'd added a substantial donation from my own funds. The Morrison Foundation would provide education about elder fraud support for victims and advocacy for stronger legal protections. Sophia had agreed to run the day-to-day operations using her marketing skills to raise awareness. "You know," Sophia said as we walked through the offices, "turning my worst mistake into something that helps other people. It makes it mean something. It makes it matter. You matter, Sophia, with or without this foundation. but I'm proud of you for turning your pain into purpose." Later that afternoon, I drove to the cemetery where Richard was buried. I hadn't been in a while. The pain of standing at his grave had been too much for a long time. But today felt right. I sat on the bench near his headstone and told him everything. "You would have handled this differently," I said to the granite marker. "You would have called the police immediately, let them do their job, stayed safe and cautious. But Richard Fries needed to do this myself. I needed to prove to myself more than anyone that I was still strong, that losing you didn't break me." A breeze rustled the leaves overhead, and I chose to believe it was Richard's way of saying he understood. "I miss you," I continued. "Every single day I miss you. But I'm okay, Richard. I'm more than okay. I'm living again, not just surviving, and that's what you would have wanted for me." That evening I sat in my living room, the house I'd refused to sell despite Derek's pressure, and reflected on everything that had happened. My phone buzzed with a text from Margaret Wellington. "Charlotte, thank you again for today. The foundation is going to help so many people. You turned something terrible into something beautiful." Then one from Helen. "Proud to know you, Charlotte. You're proof that we're not helpless just because we're over 60. And finally one from Janet. "I got a job offer today. Real job, good salary. Starting to rebuild. Thank you for showing me it was possible." I smiled, typing responses to each of them. We'd formed a bond, the four of us survivors who'd refused to let one man define our futures. Sophia called around 8. "Mom, I just wanted to say thank you for protecting me, for being strong enough to do what needed to be done, and for showing me that being deceived doesn't make me weak. How I respond to it is what matters. You're stronger than you know, sweetheart. You always have been. I learned from the best." I could hear the smile in her voice. "Love you, Mom." "Love you too, baby." After we hung up, I walked to the window and looked out at my backyard. Richard's roses had recovered nicely from being used as a landing pad for a fleeing con artist. They were blooming again, hardy and beautiful. I thought about Derek Morrison sitting in a federal prison facing 28 years of consequences for his actions. I thought about the 3 women whose lives he'd destroyed and how they were slowly rebuilding. I thought about Sophia and how she'd found purpose in the midst of heartbreak. And I thought about myself, Charlotte Morrison, 64 years old, widow, mother investor, and apparently detective. I'd spent 2 years after Richard's death feeling diminished, half a person defined by what I'd lost rather than what I'd retained. But Derek Morrison had given me an unexpected gift. He'd reminded me of my own strength. I pulled out my phone and recorded a video message. "My name is Charlotte Morrison, and I want to tell you a story. At 63 years old, I discovered that my future son-in-law was planning to kidnap me for ransom. He'd been stealing from me, lying to my daughter, and targeting me because he thought I'd be an easy victim, just another lonely widow who'd be grateful for his attention. He was wrong, and I want every woman watching this, especially those over 50, to understand something. Being underestimated is not a weakness. It's a weapon. It means your opponent has already made a fatal mistake. If you're being targeted, if someone is making you feel helpless or incompetent because of your age, trust your instincts. You are not too old to fight back. You are not too fragile to protect yourself. You are not helpless. I'm 64 years old, worth $8.5 million, and I've never been happier to be underestimated. Because the next con artist who thinks I'm an easy target is going to discover exactly what happened to the last one. Some lessons, after all, are worth sharing. I posted the video to the Foundation's website, then poured myself a glass of wine and toasted Richard's photo on the mantelpiece. "To new beginnings," I said aloud, "and to proving that widows aren't helpless. We're just choosing our battles." Outside, the Portland evening was cool and clear. Somewhere in a federal prison, Derek Morrison was learning that his choices have consequences. Somewhere in the city, Sophia was building a new life with purpose and meaning. And somewhere in heaven, if I believed in such things, Richard was probably shaking his head and smiling at my stubbornness. I'd been underestimated, manipulated, and targeted. And I'd won. Not because I was smarter than everyone else, or because I had more resources, or because I was lucky. I'd won because I refused to be a victim. Because when someone tried to make me feel helpless, I chose to become dangerous instead. And that I thought taking another sip of wine was a lesson worth teaching to every woman who'd ever been told she was too old, too weak, too fragile to fight back.